On September 10th, 2025, at Utah Valley University, Charlie Kirk, a 32-year-old political commentator and co-founder of Turning Point USA, was conducting a campus event when an incident occurred at approximately 12:23 p.m. According to official reports, he sustained injuries that would lead to him being pronounced deceased shortly after. We continue with the same theory discussed earlier, the Middle Eastern angle. In this account, Kirk's growing independence on foreign policy allegedly made him a liability to an allied intelligence service. The theory claims they would not act openly, but instead orchestrate a covert false flag using an unstable domestic actor, masking any sign of foreign involvement. No direct contact, no obvious connections, just subtle influence delivered through layers of cutouts and proxies that made Robinson believe the decision was entirely his own. Perhaps an anonymous online contact who validated his anger. Perhaps a friend who was actually an asset, who encouraged his darkest thoughts. Perhaps access to information or equipment that appeared coincidental but was actually carefully arranged. The operation would be designed to be absolutely untraceable. Even if investigators found Robinson and built their case, they would find exactly what they expected: a lone individual motivated by political hatred. The intelligence service would remain invisible, their involvement impossible to prove. Proponents of this theory point to the speed and precision of the incident. A single shot, fatal, immediate, no follow-up shots needed. While an amateur could certainly get lucky, they argue it suggests a level of training or preparation that Robinson's background doesn't obviously explain. Did he practice extensively? Did someone teach him? The official investigation has been silent on these details, which to conspiracy theorists suggests there's something being concealed. The criticism of this theory is fierce and multifaceted. Officials from the nation in question have vehemently denied any involvement, calling the allegations baseless, offensive, and noting their resemblance to harmful historical conspiracy theories that have targeted their people. That's not a small point. This theory walks an unpredictable, mentally unstable individual to commit a specific act at a specific time in a specific way, without him ever realizing he was being manipulated, and without leaving any traceable evidence. It's the stuff of spy fiction, not real-world intelligence operations. Moreover, if this particular intelligence service wanted someone neutralized, they have other options: character assassination, financial pressure, legal troubles, hacking and leaking embarrassing information. Actual violence is the riskiest, most permanent, and most difficult to deny option. It's the choice of last resort, used only when all other approaches have failed, and the target is truly existential. Was Kirk really that level of threat? A conservative commentator who was asking mild questions about foreign aid? It's an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence, and no such evidence has emerged. Theory 3. The call from inside. Perhaps the most unsettling theory doesn't look abroad at all. It looks inward, toward the very movement Kirk helped build. This narrative isn't about geopolitics or international alliances. It's about power, money, control, the future of American conservatism itself. Kirk had built an empire. Turning Point USA wasn't just an organization, it was a machine, a massive structure with chapters on hundreds of campuses coordinated through regional and national offices, a donor network worth tens of millions of dollars annually, connecting wealthy individuals to a movement that promised to shape the next generation, a media platform reaching millions of young voters through podcasts, social media, events, and merchandise. He wasn't just influential, he was the gatekeeper who controlled access to America's young conservative voters. And not everyone on the right was happy about that arrangement. The conservative movement isn't monolithic. Beneath the surface unity presented during elections, there are factions with fundamentally different visions. There are the cultural conservatives who focus on social issues, the economic conservatives who prioritize free markets and deregulation, the national security hawks who want aggressive foreign policy, the populists who distrust institutions and elites, the religious conservatives who see politics through a moral lens. Kirk had built his empire primarily in the cultural conservative space: campus activism, fighting woke ideology, defending free speech, taking on progressive professors and administrators. It was effective, it was popular with donors, and it reached millions. But other factions were growing frustrated. The National Conservatives thought Kirk's focus on campus culture wars was a petty distraction from more serious concerns about economic policy, immigration, and wielding state power aggressively. They wanted a more serious, more organized, more strategically focused movement. They saw Kirk's brand as performance art, entertaining, but ultimately shallow, and they wanted his donor list for their own think tanks, candidates, and initiatives. Then there were the old guard, establishment Republican mega donors. These pro business conservatives had initially funded Kirk to fight progressives on campus, but they were growing increasingly uncomfortable with his populist rhetoric. He'd started attacking woke corporations, he'd questioned big tech companies, he'd expressed skepticism about certain business practices. They'd funded him to be a weapon against the left, but their weapon had become too independent, too unpredictable, too willing to turn that criticism toward the business community itself. There were also younger, ambitious conservative figures who saw themselves as Kirk's natural successors, except Kirk wasn't going anywhere. He was only 32. He could potentially control the youth conservative movement for another 30 years. For people who wanted to build their own platforms, their own organizations, their own relationships with donors, Kirk was an obstacle that seemed permanent. The theory goes that a coalition of these rival factions, or perhaps just one well-funded group within them, decided Kirk had to be removed, not defeated in debate, not out-organized, not gradually made irrelevant, actually removed, permanently. His personality was so powerful, his brand so strong, his organizational control so complete, that as long as he was alive, he'd be the center of gravity for youth conservatism. But with him gone, everything would be up for grabs. His followers could be redirected, his donors could be contacted, his organization could be reformed under new leadership with different priorities. His infrastructure could be repurposed. The 2026 midterm elections were approaching. The 2028 presidential race was on the horizon. Control over the machinery that mobilized young conservative voters was worth billions of dollars in political influence. It was worth almost anything. So how would such a conspiracy work? This kind of plot would have to be absolutely airtight. We're not talking about trained intelligence professionals with government resources. We're talking about political operatives and wealthy individuals who would need to hire expertise. The theory suggests that one or more billionaire donors hired a private security and intelligence firm, the kind of company staffed with former operatives from the CIA, FBI, and military special operations. These firms exist in a legal gray area, providing services that government agencies can't or won't provide. They have the skills, the experience, and most importantly, the lack of official constraints that give them operational flexibility. Their assignment: solve the Kirk problem with absolute deniability. The firm would have conducted extensive research. Robinson wouldn't have been chosen randomly. He would have been identified through systematic analysis of online behavior, looking for someone who was already unstable, already angry, already focused on Kirk as a target, someone who could plausibly have acted alone, someone whose background would support the lone individual narrative. Once identified, the support could be carefully provided, not crude and obvious, but subtle and gradual. Maybe Robinson gets access to a firing range through a chance encounter with someone who turns out to be connected to the operation. Maybe he receives the rifle from an acquaintance who sells it for unusually cheap. Maybe he gets information about Kirk's schedule and campus security through research he thinks he's conducting himself, but which is actually being fed to him through manipulated search results and planted information. The money would be completely invisible. A multi-million dollar payment to a private security firm would be disguised in financial records as a contract for security consultation, risk analysis, or opposition research, all legitimate sounding services that these firms regularly provide. The payment would be routed through multiple corporate entities, trusts, and foundations. Even skilled forensic accountants would struggle to trace it. This theory gained traction because of what happened immediately after the incident. While the public was shocked and horrified, there was a remarkably swift consolidation of power within conservative circles. Within a week, articles appeared in major conservative publications questioning Kirk's organizational model. Within 2 weeks, some of his biggest critics were appearing on television, positioned as the new, mature voices of conservatism. Within 3 weeks, there were quiet approaches to Kirk's major donors, suggesting it might be time to redirect their support. To supporters of this theory, the timing wasn't just opportunism. It was too quick, too coordinated, too efficient. It looked like a plan that had been prepared in advance, just waiting for the trigger event to set it in motion. They point to specific individuals who seemed to benefit most from Kirk's absence. Conservative figures who'd been working in Kirk's shadow suddenly found themselves with platforms and opportunities. Organizations that competed with Turning Point USA for donors and attention suddenly found doors opening. The vacuum left by Kirk's absence was being filled with suspicious efficiency. But this is also the most cynical theory of them all. It requires believing that American political figures, people who claim to be fighting for traditional values and moral principles, would resort to the most extreme measures imaginable, that they would be willing to take a human life for political advantage. It requires believing that multiple people could be involved in such a conspiracy without anyone talking. In a world of recording devices, digital communication, and whistleblower protections, keeping such a secret would be extraordinarily difficult. Someone would have to negotiate the contract. Someone would have to authorize the payment. Operatives would have to carry out the plan. Each person represents a potential leak, and the consequences, if discovered, would be absolutely catastrophic. This wouldn't be a financial scandal or a sex scandal or even a corruption scandal. This would be conspiracy to commit murder of a prominent political figure. Everyone involved would face life in prison. The entire conservative movement would be destroyed by the revelation. No political goal could possibly be worth that risk. Critics of this theory argue it's the product of paranoid thinking. Yes, there are rivalries within political movements. Yes, people compete for resources and influence. But there's an enormous difference between political competition and conspiracy to commit murder. Most human beings, even ambitious and ruthless ones, have moral lines they won't cross. And most people, even those seeking power, are rational enough to understand that the risks of such an operation vastly outweigh any potential benefits. The simpler explanation remains: Robinson was exactly what he appeared to be, a disturbed individual who consumed political content until it radicalized him, a lonely person who found community in online spaces that fed his anger, an unstable mind that fixated on Kirk as the symbol of everything he hated, and eventually someone who decided to act on those feelings. It's a tragic story, but it's also a common one. Political polarization has reached levels where violence becomes thinkable for people on the edges. The internet allows people to descend into echo chambers that reinforce and amplify extreme views. Mental health systems fail people who need help. Access to weapons makes it possible to turn violent thoughts into violent actions. That explanation doesn't require billionaire conspiracies or private mercenaries or elaborate plots. It just requires one person making a terrible choice. Next, the information warfare. While these three theories dominated the online discourse, the battle over narrative took on a life of its own. This wasn't just people speculating, it became a full-scale information war with different factions pushing different interpretations. Social media became a battlefield, hashtags trended and counter-trended. Hash truth for Kirk competed with hash lone gunman lie. Hash foreign interference faced hash domestic terrorism. Each side marshaled evidence, real and imagined, to support their preferred narrative. YouTube channels dedicated to alternative media produced hours of content, analyzing every detail. They slow-motion scrutinized video footage looking for anomalies. They enhanced audio recordings searching for additional sounds. They created elaborate timelines with color-coded connections. Some of this analysis was thoughtful and raised legitimate questions. Much of it was wildly speculative, Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to investigating the incident. Some brought on actual experts, former law enforcement, ballistic specialists, intelligence analysts. Others platformed conspiracy theorists who made increasingly outlandish claims. The line between investigation and entertainment blurred. Mainstream media tried to hold the line, generally sticking to the official narrative while acknowledging that some online have questioned aspects of the story. But their caution was interpreted by skeptics as complicity. If the media wasn't aggressively investigating alternative theories, it meant they were part of the cover up. The families involved, Kirk's family and Robinson's family, found themselves trapped in this information warfare. Kirk's family released statements calling for unity and allowing the justice system to work, but conspiracy theorists interpreted their measured language as evidence they'd been threatened into silence. Robinson's family maintained he was troubled but not violent, which was used to support theories that he was manipulated or framed. Even experts who tried to provide objective analysis found themselves attacked from multiple sides. Forensic specialists who confirmed the official timeline were accused of being paid off. Psychologists who explained how someone could radicalize themselves were dismissed as naive or complicit. The very expertise that should have helped clarify matters became another contested battleground. But what about the fractured truth? 20 days later, we're left with this: one official explanation and multiple alternative theories, each with internal logic, each with alleged supporting evidence, each pointing to different actors with different motives, each gathering followers who are absolutely convinced they've identified the real truth. The official story says Tyler James Robinson, a disturbed young man radicalized by political content and mental health struggles, obtained a hunting rifle, positioned himself on a rooftop, and committed a terrible act. He left behind evidence of his intentions. He turned himself in. He is now facing trial. The Eastern Shadow Theory says a foreign intelligence service identified Kirk as a valuable asset who was about to become an enemy and arranged for him to be eliminated using a domestic patsy who could be manipulated into action without knowing he was being used. The Middle Eastern Angle Theory says a different intelligence service viewed Kirk's evolving questions about foreign policy as a threat to a crucial alliance and used their sophisticated capabilities to orchestrate his removal while maintaining complete deniability. The enemy within theory says rival factions in the American conservative movement viewed Kirk as an obstacle to their own ambitions and hired private operatives to arrange his death and seize control of his organization and resources. Three theories, three villains, three plots, three versions of reality. And that might be the real story here, not what actually happened in Utah, but what's happening to our collective ability to agree on truth. In an environment of deep distrust, official explanations are automatically suspect. Everyone becomes an investigator, assembling their own version of events from digital fragments. We live in a choose-your-own-reality environment where the story you believe says as much about your existing worldview as it does about the actual evidence. The problem is that this methodology can lead anywhere. Coincidences become evidence. Absence of proof becomes proof of cover-up. Unexplained details become smoking guns. The story you believe depends on what you already suspected about the world before the incident ever occurred. If you already distrusted foreign governments and believed in their extensive interference in American affairs, the Eastern Shadow Theory confirms everything you suspected. If you were already skeptical of Middle Eastern intelligence capabilities and their influence on American politics, that theory feels obvious. If you already believe that American politics is corrupt and that powerful people eliminate obstacles without conscience, the enemy within theory seems like the only logical explanation. Each theory is a mirror reflecting back the fears and suspicions people brought with them. So what do we actually know? Strip away the speculation, the alleged connections, the suspicious coincidences, the convenient timing. What remains? We know an incident occurred on September 10th, 2025 at Utah Valley University. We know Charlie Kirk sustained fatal injuries. We know Tyler James Robinson is in custody, charged with causing those injuries. We know an official investigation has produced a documented account with physical evidence, witness testimony, and recorded communications. We know that account describes a lone individual motivated by political hatred. We also know that millions of people don't believe it, or can't believe it, or won't believe it. The theories examined here remain unverified. They're built on speculation, alleged connections, and circumstantial observations. They reflect anxieties about the current moment, about foreign influence, about intelligence agencies operating without oversight, about the corruption of political movements, about the lengths people will go to for power. But they're not proven. Despite thousands of hours of amateur investigation, despite all the analysis and enhancement in timeline construction, no definitive evidence has emerged to support any of them. No whistleblower has come forward. No document has leaked. No insider has broken the conspiracy of silence that would have to exist for any of these theories to be true. That doesn't mean the theories are wrong. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Sophisticated operations are designed to leave no trace. Real conspiracies do happen in history. Power does corrupt. Intelligence services do conduct operations that later come to light. But it also doesn't mean the theories are right. Sometimes terrible things happen for simple reasons. Sometimes one person with a weapon and hatred in their heart is the whole story. Sometimes there is no vast conspiracy, no hidden puppet master, no grand plan, just human tragedy unfolding in its senseless, random way. So that leaves us living in the aftermath. The incident in Utah did more than claim one life. It revealed the fault lines running through our society. It exposed how fractured our shared reality has become. It demonstrated that we no longer have a common framework for understanding major events. In previous eras, there might have been conspiracy theories on the margins, but a general consensus would emerge. The major institutions, media, government, academia, would investigate, report, and most people would accept their findings, even if skeptically. There would be one story that most people believed, even if some questioned it. That consensus is gone. Now we have competing realities, each with its own evidence base, its own experts, its own media ecosystem. People don't just disagree about what happened, they're living in completely different informational universes. This has consequences. If we can't agree on basic facts, how do we function as a society? If every official explanation is immediately dismissed as a cover-up, what's the point of investigations? If every alternative theory is embraced by millions regardless of evidence, how do we distinguish truth from fiction? The murder of Charlie Kirk, and yes, we can use that word now, removed from the specific theories about who ordered it, became a Rorschach test for American society. What you see in it says more about you than about what actually happened. For still others, it's a moment to seize advantage, an opportunity to reshape movements, redirect resources, claim influence. The incident becomes less about what happened and more about what happens next. Who fills the vacuum? Who claims the mantle? Who controls the narrative going forward? In the 20 days since the shot rang out in Utah, Tyler James Robinson has remained in custody. His attorneys have entered a not guilty plea. The trial date has been set for next spring. The prosecution is preparing its case, organizing evidence, interviewing witnesses. The process of justice, slow and methodical, continues. But outside the courtroom, the trial has already happened 1,000 times over. On social media, in podcasts, in late-night conversations, people have rendered their verdicts. Some believe Robinson is a disturbed lone individual who will rightfully face maximum punishment. Others believe he's a patsy, a manipulated pawn who deserves sympathy even as he faces consequences. Still others believe he's something else entirely, an asset, a operative, a tool of forces he may not even understand. The physical evidence will be presented. Expert witnesses will testify. The jury will deliberate. A legal verdict will be reached. And it won't matter to millions of people who have already decided what they believe happened. But now, the unanswered question. This document has presented various theories for examination. The Eastern shadow pointing to foreign manipulation, the Middle Eastern angle suggesting Allied intelligence involvement, and the enemy within proposing domestic conspiracy. None of them have been verified. All of them should be understood as speculation rather than established fact. Official legal proceedings continue, and conclusions should be based on credible evidence presented in court rather than online conjecture. The theories discussed reflect the information warfare of our current age, where competing narratives battle for acceptance regardless of supporting evidence. But the proliferation of these theories tells us something important about this moment in history, about fractured trust, about competing realities, about what happens when a significant event occurs. And the official explanation, however well documented, can't satisfy our need to understand not just what happened, but why it happened and what it means. The trial will eventually conclude, a verdict will be delivered, sentences will be imposed, the legal system will do what it does, methodically and formally resolving the question of Robinson's guilt or innocence according to the law. But the larger questions will remain. The theories will persist. New evidence, real or imagined, will emerge. Anniversaries will bring renewed interest. Documentaries will be made. Books will be written. And people will continue to believe what they choose to believe. 20 days after the shot that ended Charlie Kirk's life, we're left with this: a dead political figure, a defendant awaiting trial, and a nation that can't agree on what happened or why. We're left with competing stories that say as much about our fractured society as they do about events in Utah. Was Tyler James Robinson a lone individual consumed by hatred? Was he a pawn in a foreign intelligence operation? Was he manipulated by Allied intelligence services? Was he the weapon wielded by domestic conspirators? The only thing we know for certain is that the story is far from over. The shot that rang out on September 10th didn't just end one life, it shattered our shared sense of reality. And in the fractured pieces, everyone sees a different truth. The conversation continues, the theories evolve, the investigation proceeds, both official and unofficial, and somewhere in the noise, the actual truth exists, whether it's simple or complex, whether it matches the official story or one of the alternatives, whether it will ever be definitively known. 20 days, 3 theories, one question that refuses to be answered to everyone's satisfaction. The incident in Utah didn't just claim one life. It revealed that we're living in separate realities, consuming separate information, trusting separate authorities, and arriving at incompatible conclusions. It showed that we've lost something fundamental, not just a political figure, but our collective ability to agree on what's real. And that might be the most disturbing revelation of all.